Hello, so today's video is going to be on multiplying decimals. This is a grade 2/3 topic, and there's four types of examples, four types of difficulty levels are up on the screen now, and I'll come back to this at the end of the video. So before we go on to the examples, you need to be able to understand, you need to have a good understanding of a few different areas. One of them is place value. That's identifying whether a digit represents your tens, units, tenths, hundredths, or anything like that. You also need to be able to multiply integers together. An integer is a whole number. You also need to be able to add and subtract integers, whole numbers, and decimals as well. So I've got four examples to go through. This is the first one, where we're asked to multiply a whole number by a decimal. Now, the first thing I would always encourage you to do with these questions is to make an estimate as to what your answer should be, roughly. So the first number is 7. This second number, if I think of it in terms of a whole number, that's 6. That's around about 6 if I round it to the nearest whole number. So if I estimated my calculation by doing 7 times 6 is 42, that tells me that my answer needs to be around about 42. So if you're getting an answer that's nowhere near that, you know you've probably gone wrong somewhere. Okay, so we're going to start by writing out the question. 7 times 5.9. Okay, now the first thing you're going to do is underline any digits that appear after a decimal point. Underline any digits after a decimal. So for 7, there aren't any digits after the decimal. However, in the 5.9, we're just going to underline the one digit. So we have underlined in total one digit in our question. That means our final answer must have exactly one digit, no more, no less, exactly one digit after the decimal point, even if it turns out to be a 0. So now what we're going to do is we're going to temporarily ignore the decimals, and we're just going to do 7 times 59. Now you can do any method you want for this, whichever method you prefer. I'm going to do the grid method, so I'm going to break that 59 down into a 50 and a 9, and then I'm going to put the 7 there. And then I'm just going to multiply these numbers together. So 7 times 5 is 35, so 7 times 50 would be 350. It would be 10 times bigger. And then I'm going to do 7 times 9, which is 63. And if I just add these numbers together, 650 plus 63, that's going to give me 413. Now, remember at the start we said our answer had to have exactly one digit after the decimal point. So I need to write 413 out, but if I put my decimal point here, for example, then there would be 3 digits after the decimal point. If I put it here, there'd be 2 digits. Remember, I wanted exactly one digit after the decimal point, even if that 3 were a 0. So my answer here to 7 times 5.9 is 41.3. And again, remember we estimated to start with, so it's around about 42. So that's a good indicator that unless you've made any little arithmetic or adding or subtracting errors, that you're probably correct. Okay, next example. So you also need to be able to multiply 2 decimals where both of the decimals are less than 1. And a lot of people get caught out by these questions. So as before, I'm just going to underline any digits that happen after a decimal point, and then I'm going to count the total number of digits that I've underlined. So in this case, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 digits after my decimal. Remember, that means that my answer must have exactly 5 digits after the decimal point. So now I'm just going to do 4 times 3, which is 12. Now when I write this digit, when I write 12 out, there are only 2 digits there, but I want 5 digits after the decimal point. So What some people might do is they add zeros to the end and they just do this. However, that's not quite right. What we want to do is we're actually going to fill in, I want 5 digits after a decimal point, I've already got 2 of them. I'm actually going to fill in the other 3 with zeros and then put my decimal point. So this one here, remember you can't, under the units column, you need to put a 0 there as well. So the answer to 0.04 times 0.003 is 0.00012, and that's your answer to that one. Okay, for this one here, same as before, 1, 2, 3. This time we've got 4 digits after the decimal point, so our answer has to have exactly 4 digits. I'm going to use the grid method again, and then actually I'm going to show you another method after you've done this one, after we've done this one for the same question. So I'm going to start by doing 52 times 144. So I've just broken the 52 down into a 50 and a 2, and the 144 down into a 100, a 40 and a 4. And then we're going to multiply those numbers together. Well, 5 times 1 is 5. And then I've got these 3 zeros, so 50 times 100 is 5,000. 5 times 4 is 20, and then I've got 2 zeros. 5 times 4 is 20 again, and then 1 0. 2 lots of 100 is 200. 2 lots of 40 is 80. 2 lots of 4 is 8. Now we're going to add these numbers together. 5,000, remember to line up your thousands, hundreds, tens and units. There's a 200 there, and then there's a 200 there as well. Might be worth ticking them off as you put them in. There's an 80, and there's an 8. Let's try that again. And I'm adding these numbers up. So starting on the right hand side, what's going on here? That's an 8. So then we've got another 8. 0 plus 0 plus 2 plus 2 gives you 4. 5 plus 2 gives you 7. So remember our question, had exactly 4 digits after the decimal point. So I'm just going to write out 7488. And here I'd need to put the decimal point here so that I then have exactly 4 digits after the decimal point, and then fill in that units. Because there was no number there, with a 0. And this makes sense for that answer, because 5.2 is about 5. 0.144 is a little bit more than 1/10. So 1/10 of a number is the same as dividing it by 10. So 5 divided by 10 would be about 0.5, a half. This is just a little bit more, so that seems reasonable. Okay, the other method, you don't have to use it, but it's a method sometimes known as the lattice method, or the Galosia method. Is a method I really like for multiplying decimals. You don't have to use this one, you don't have to use any of them, but this one I find quite useful. So if I just write out the question again, 5.2 times 0.144, just so I can see it when I scroll down. Okay, so this is a 2-digit number, and this is a 4-digit number. So I'm going to do a grid that goes 4 across and 2 down. And I'm just going to write these numbers in. So I'm going to write 0 above the first box, and above this line here I'm going to write a decimal point. 1, 4 and 4. And then down the side, the right hand side, I'm going to write 5 and then line up with that line a point and then put the 2. Now this method looks confusing, because what we're now going to do, it's not that bad when you get used to it, is put diagonal lines between each of the little boxes. Now all I'm going to do is in these 2 boxes here, I'm simply going to multiply the two numbers that meet. So I'm going to multiply the 0 times 5. In the top left bit, we put the number of tens, and in the bottom right bit, we're going to put the number of units. So 0 times 5 is actually 0. And we're going to do the same for all the rest of them. So 1 times 5 would give me 5. So that's 0 tens and 5 units. 4 times 5 is 20. So that's 2 tens and 0 units. 4 times 5 is 20 again. And then we'll do the same at the bottom, just multiplying all of these numbers by 2. And 4 times 2 is 8. Okay, now where these diagonal lines come down, I'm just going to extend them a little bit. Now to decide where the decimal point goes, we're just going to follow this line along for this one, and this line down for this one until they meet. And then that decimal point comes down this line down here, down this diagonal line. Now, all I'm going to do is I'm going to start over here and I'm going to add the diagonals up. So the total of this one is just 8. The total of this diagonal here, 0 plus 0 plus 8 is 8. The total of this one here is 2 plus 0 plus 0 plus 2 is 4. The total of this one here is 2 plus 5 plus 0 plus 0 gives you 7, and then adding these zeros. So my answer is 0.7488. What I like about this method is that you never have to worry about multiplying any two digits that are over 9. So as long as you know up to your 9 times table, you should be okay with that method. You don't have to use it, but there's just an alternative way. Okay, lastly, you need to be able to answer worded kind of problems. So decimals in real life might be used for things like money. So we'll just go through this question here. So there are 28 students going on a school trip, and the trip costs £8.90 for each student. So the price of one student is £8.90, but there are 28 students going. Because we've multiplied the number of students here by 28, we also need to multiply the price of one student by 28. The key here is picking out the information from the question. 28 students, £8.90 per student. And hopefully you can see that to work this one out, we're going to be doing 28 multiplied by £8.90. So we can ignore the pound sign for a minute as long as we remember to put that back in at the end. Okay, so there are two digits that appear after the decimal point. That means that our answer must have two decimals after it. You can do the 28 times 890 if you like. I'm going to do 8.90. I'm going to use the same method I showed you a second ago. And in this one here, there's 28. There's no decimal on this one though. Well, not here anyway. The decimal point would be here. The decimal point is always after the units, and that 8 represents our units. Okay, so I'm just going to multiply the numbers together. So 8 times 2 is 16, 9 times 2 is 18, 0 times 2 is 0, 0 times 8 is 0, 8 times 8 is 64, 9 times 8 is 72. So if I just extend my diagonal lines here, now here we follow this decimal point along and this decimal point down. They would meet here, and then they follow that diagonal line down. Okay, then we just add up these. 0, this one's going to be 2. Now this didn't happen in the last one, the last time I did this one, but we're going to add these ones up. 0 plus 8 is 8, plus 7 is 15, plus 4 is 19. So I've got 110 and 9 units. I'm going to write the 9 there. and the 110 gets carried over into the next column. Now this does not become 16, this just becomes a 1 and a 6 separately. So now we're going to add these up. 1 plus 6 is 7, plus another 6 is 13, plus another 1 is 14. So I'm going to write the 4 units and carry the 110. And then this diagonal here would be 2. This tells us that £249.20 would be the total cost. And if you just did it the other way, 28 multiplied by 890, and then put your 2 decimals in at the end, if you multiply that together, you get 24920, 24,920, and then because our question had 2 digits underlined, we'd need to put it there. So you get the same answer. Just at the end, remember to put your pound sign in. Okay, so that's multiplying decimals. I have made another question generator which I will show you. So it's when you open it, I'll put a link to this in the description, in the YouTube video description, so you can download it and get some practice. When you open the file, you will need to click either enable content or enable macros, and that appears in a little yellow ribbon at the top. If you do not do that, the whole question generator won't work because you won't be able to press the buttons and generate new questions. Okay, it's automatically set to increasing difficulty, so you can generate questions like the ones I've just done. If you want to focus on a particular type of question, maybe the third example, you can select type 3 and it will give you lots of questions like that. You can get the answers by clicking on the answer box or by clicking show all answers there. Once you've had a go at doing all of them and you're feeling confident, I would suggest selecting mix of questions, because in an exam it never tells you, or a test it never says to you, this is an example of an easy question, this is an example of a difficult question. You need to be able to pick out what it's asking you. So if you can do all of them, it's a good idea to try the mix of questions because that shows a really good understanding of the topic. But that's it. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you found it useful. Bye bye.